streaming, start recording. And I think that starts to work. Will it not? Ah, yes, there we are. Okay, so we are streaming. View, admit all. Perfect. All right. So lots of people coming in. And yeah, I think the stream is working well now. I'll have to delete that other short clip, but I think we're good here. I don't have my photo for you to look at in Zoom, but I actually am on the YouTube channel. So and now I will publish the fact that we're live on YouTube. I'll probably put in a different background. I really should have a lot more scenes set up in my OBS so I can switch them quicker. Oh, weird. I've had this problem before with the colors turning bizarre. That's strange.
I can see it already.
I don't know if that's gonna have the same problem playing on that. Yeah, it's blue. I've had this problem before. Video capture, screen capture properties.
I get. I'm seeing you perfectly fine in YouTube. Huh?
Well, the colors are screwed up for some reason. Yellow is not. Is not yellow, and I've had this problem with OBS before. I forget how I change. That. Properties. Interesting. That's a very odd capture. Cancel properties. I want that. Swap red and blue. Oh, weird, but I have to. I don't know why that properties switched off, but swapping red and blue for some reason is what I needed. And yeah. Oh, so we have a lot of folks joining. Welcome. I'm just configuring YouTube as usual. We just finished a really exciting 2-day workshop, a pretty intense event modeling and event sourcing discussions and workshops, looking at code, looking at concepts. So now it's the after party, but we bring with us a problem to finish up our blue-green deploys for read models. So that's for us to come up with a scenario and start to classify some of the problems. So in this case, we are looking at perhaps a bug in a discount read model, and we want to exercise closing the books on an actual read model, not just an aggregate. and show how that helps to have fast blue-green deploys because you have small amount of data perhaps, or at least very little, if any, events to replay to fix the bug. So please feel free to discuss amongst yourselves as well how you would tackle this. Ideally, we can show that with an EventStore system, these are actually more accountable, faster, better ways to do blue-green deploys when it comes down to fixing some serious bugs that are quite large, where maybe without event sourcing, they'd be next to impossible to do. While I keep fiddling with YouTube titles and making sure that everyone knows that we're doing this right now. So.
Well, I think there are two problems here. At least where we left off, like one was with the wrong read model, and the other was if we were actually making wrong decisions based on those wrong read models in the past.
Mm-hmm. So we should pick
like
one problem and solve one at a time.
For the blue-green deployment, so if the read models are on a disk simply, okay, let's pick on a disk. Then I would just build the read models in a different directory and then switch a symlink once caught up.
Correct.
If it's in a table, I would like build it on a kind of with a marker saying, okay, this is the replay, and at the end just make a transaction. Okay, mark the old ones as, like, I guess that's tombstoning them, and then switch the replay models over to the new one.
Yeah.
To be active, right?
So we're using the regular event modeling Miro board that we use for the Meetup. So if you have access to it, my cursor is currently at that area. So if you click on my name, you can jump in there, and maybe we can. We started to brainstorm some of the events that could happen to make these. Mark some things as being swapped. Here's where we swap things. Here's an event that marks on a timeline when we adjust the data to fix the effects of the bug in the data, patch things up. So all of those things are meta events, really. We're not talking about the business value per se, but really about instrumenting the fixes to how we fix the data so that it's useful to business again, and allows the correct behavior of the system. So I started with a few there, the yellow boxes that you see when we have the new read model made. We have a switch there. When we switched right behind my head, for those looking at YouTube, switched to V2 of the current read model. That's when you do that swap to go look at the new one. If we had to build one up alongside and then just switch, there's other things we can discuss here during the meetup, such as what do you do for the users while the bug, can we have more control around the buggy system, not just take the whole site offline, but maybe just close perhaps the checkout process or the payment process until the bug is fixed, and then unlock it so people can still use 90% of the functionality. You start to have some real good options here with EventStore systems and the granularity of control that you get. So what are your thoughts around what we want to do here, but also let's fix some of these immediate problems of, I have a bug, I've given too much of a discount to either one person, or I had a read model that showed a store-wide discount. Maybe that was too big, and we discussed before, that's a bigger issue because it has multiple entities involved. in what that amount is. And it's going to require replaying all of the events potentially. How do we do that when we have blue-green and combined with closing of the books and tombstoning? So those are the things to consider for today. And yeah, let's hear some ideas and see if people can look at these yellow boxes here. Do we have all of the possible events that we need to think about when we're dealing with this situation? And from an architectural perspective, just for people that are joining in right now, if I zoom out here, we're talking about this type of blue-green deploy, version 1.2 to version 1.3. We have active data that we want to have as a small amount of data to deal with. And not have to replay all the events, all 10 terabytes of old events to fix this problem. We've had some other examples of looking at this problem in other areas here. I believe we have it here, one attempt to look at it before. And so now we're trying again here to say, what does that scenario look like if we have a smaller read model that doesn't have a lot of, well, not smaller, but we have a tombstone read model that doesn't have to go and read all the history going back. And yeah, we kind of, if you want to look at more diagrams here, we kind of want this snapshot for small. So the idea of a snapshot for a read model as an initial event to seed all the data for this current month of how this read model is going to build up. That's shown in here. Well, where we replay live events and read model snapshots even for a new version, and then beside it two alternate approaches where we do what we've been learning all along, is replay every single event all the time, which is not going to work for blue-green as nicely, obviously. And then, of course, where we can ignore things.
One clarification is that we don't want to replay all 10 gigabytes of events. You mean at once? Because it is feasible to replay them if it's that feasible. No, that's an option.
And it also depends on the bug. If the bug is somewhere in the history, you have no choice but to then read everything and double check that everything will look the same. You might be able to fix by quickly manually putting in an entry to a few places to fix the current value in a row, but you certainly will have to double check that you're actually it still works for all other entries that are not currently affected, whether they're actually telling you the truth or not.
If I understood it correctly, then we're taking for granted that our events are correct. Our events are correct,
yeah,
but
so
it's a read model. It's a read model.
Yeah, let's just assume that there's a calculation error in the read model itself for now. Let's not go down the rabbit hole of we're chasing a bug in an event. We can do that as a second exercise. We're going to say that the read model is fine. We do have a bug with how an event got written sometime or multiple times in the past, and now we don't actually need to make any changes to the remodel itself, but we need to add some compensating actions to it to understand that there's an adjustment needed because of buggy data in events, and that might be a reason to add another version of an event, even though its schema didn't change, because you don't want to apply it to the new events coming in without the buggy data. So that's an interesting concept, because here's an event versioning purpose for not just schema changes, but for the fact that the old command handlers were introducing bugs, and so now you need a v2 of that event to mark the fact that it contains data that's adjusted. Maybe there's a 1% off or 10% off or some issue with one of the values. So that's an interesting concept.
So blue-green, if we're going to deploy a new read model, and we need to use it as soon as possible, and it can be rolled back. It's the idea that I wanted to mention before, is that then we can deploy the new read model, because the read model is also subscribed to the events. So every time a new event comes, this is slightly expensive, of course, because you have the new read model is going to be over dimension over the old one, because it's going to process massive amounts of data. So what I will do is I will build this build model in a way that when you try to read, it will check if there is a history. It will check if the record exists. If it doesn't, it will request the whole stream to feed itself. And also will be subscribed. So it will also be building from new events. So it will start to build itself in parallel as soon as we deploy it, even if we're not using it.
Yeah.
Because new events that come, we generate the new ones. Then we shift with a feature flag or something in the front end to read through the new model.
Yeah.
And it will start to hydrate itself.
So we need to put those down as actual events happening on this timeline.
Yeah, that's the bit I have no clue how to do.
Well, I'll just write them down, like in those yellow stickies. You just put them down, and I already have some of them. You can rename them. Go ahead. I was just throwing out ideas, but you can put those on a sequence saying exactly what you said, and and that should give us a framework to work around, like exactly what we need to do.
I'm refreshing Miro right now.
Yeah, it takes a while. It's a pretty big Miro board by now, and we're just adding to it even more.
Yeah, because the colors changed for me, and it was showing some history. Like you modified this half an hour ago.
Yeah. If you go back to the page, and there's a lot of changes, Miro highlights in purple the things that changed since last time, and you can turn that off with the button at the bottom. There's a hide. Change highlights or something like that.
Okay, so I cannot go. So I'm going to start a new stream because.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if you want to move my stuff out of the way, just move it out of the way. If it's or delete them. I'm not too tied to them. I just came up with them off the top of my head. So go ahead and just delete them or just change them if you want.
So the scan back was discovered. Yeah, so the events are correct because there's bad entry, so that's not something.
Well, I'm not sure if that's a scenario we want to look at again, but up to you to change it if you want to do a different scenario.
Yeah. So this scan back was discovered. The V1 we are not going to adjust it because we want to be blue-green, so we want to go back. So what we do is we model. And now we have, so we will have the V1 and V2 being built together from here. And the V2 model is fed enough. Well, no, first will be like release it. So it will start to feed itself, and there will be which model is doubled on front end. Thing is, in every step, except obviously take down V1, on every step, we can roll back. Even when this is huge, we figure out it's wrong, we can roll back to V1 because V1 is still being fed incorrectly. But if we're doing blue-green, it's because we are not in pants of fire situation.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking at this as a typical kind of just next version of a read model, then yeah, you can take it easy. And even if you don't have a snapshotted read model, and you have to replay all of that. It can take 2 days sometimes, but we're okay. We're just warming up a new version. What we want to start to look at is those emergency situations where like, we have to fix something right away, and show that by having snapshots we can operate faster.
And this is the bit that I don't know how to do. So.
Well, let's look at
no, Tombstone event V2, no, Tombstone the event store.
Well, what happens if we just make a new read model at the beginning of every month? How do you carry the values from the previous month? Right? So when I want to replay all events, I only have to go back to the beginning of the month, not to the beginning of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, then you will have to do the Tombstone thing that you mentioned, no?
Yeah, so there's a reference to, which read model should I use, because at the beginning of the month there's going to be a switch over, right? Do we use a convention where we maybe embed the date into the title of or the name of the read model, so that when there's a request for some data, it's going to look for a read model with the month and year in it that's according to the current time, and therefore it's gonna all our requests are gonna just naturally stop querying the old one. And we can do it by convention. The convention way is probably going to be easier because you don't have to worry about pointers and switching a pointer to which one is active right now. You can, like you said, proactively start to warm up the new read model on the last day of the month, and so that at midnight when the new requests come in, you're looking at something that's ready to go. So maybe, that's what you're looking at to do right now. Maybe that convention end of month is easy to do. And if that scheme is already there, then our blue-green deploy for an emergency during the middle of the month, and then, somewhere a random date, shouldn't be too bad, because in order to make a new version of that read model, we only ever, by this convention anyway, have to go back to the beginning of the month, and that shouldn't be too many events, and therefore we can create a new read model in quite quickly. It'll be seconds before it's done and ready, and then we deploy. It's really the human aspect that's going to make any delays in this respect. We're not going to be waiting a day for a read model to repopulate in this case, which is what we want. So,
but then it's not the read model; it's the event stream what you want to close up, no? Or am I missing something?
No. I mean, the read models still read and subscribe to events as they're happening, but we want to make sure that when we start that we don't have to go to the beginning of time to make a new version of, if there's a bug, like we said, in a read model. We simply go back to the beginning of the month and deploy that. Maybe the example to use really is the bug is actually in the read model, and maybe we have a off by one error or something, and it's pretty easy to take previous if date less than whenever we discovered the bug, and if that's the snapshot that we use as the first one, then we adjust all the values by 1% to accommodate for the error before, and then replay all the events using the proper logic without the off by one error. That's the workflow I think that would work to make sure that it in this case starts to exemplify how quickly we can do blue-green deploys. And this scheme should work no matter how old the system gets. If this runs for 10 years, at most what you're ever replaying is the last at most 1 month worth of events, and you can have a very fast blue-green deploy. And in order for that system to work, the old events of any previous months can sit on cold storage. You shouldn't really need to go back to those cold storage events to make adjustments to the system, yet you can still, for the most part, make use of event sourcing and all the patterns, etc. If there's serious trouble and you have to go back and look through the events that are going all the way back multiple months, you warm those up from the cold storage and do what you need. But we're hoping that 90% of the time we have this as a operational.
But you have to leave an event that represents the initial state based on the calculation of the other ones. No?
That's correct, yeah, and that's where you might have to take that, put in logic to adjust that initial state, because you understand that the bug existed in the read model for a long time, and so it depends on the nature of the bug, right? You need to have.
Wait, you generate the tombstone based on the read model. Let's call the tombstone that event.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Yeah.
You can.
Course,
a really dumb way of doing it is just take all the rows in the database for that table, for that read model, and put them in an event called month start. And you create that at the end of the month, and you start using, you start creating a new read model. Like I said, we can use a convention instead, where we just have the month, the year, and the month. And so any queries that come in on the next month, they naturally look for a table that's called 2021-05 for May, right? And -06 for June, and so on. And so the system should just work based on this convention, and we don't have to worry about pointers and all that. Now, we can elaborate from then on and say that, well, if we don't have a convention, that's easy. We have to manipulate, pointers, which is the current one that's live, and kind of have this Merkle tree DAG kind of integrity of pointers to show when we switch over, much like you switch a branch in Git, all of a sudden it's this history you're looking at and all of that. So we can get to that, but baby steps first. We kind of tried to talk about everything at the beginning, and we couldn't really organize ourselves with an example to walk through. But I think if we do this, a simple example of a person's history of spending, if they spend more than $1,000 in the last 30 days, then they get 10% discount. And so that requires you to carry over some history in the initial snapshot per month, because you're saying last 30 days. So you're always going to be looking at 2 months of data.
I think there's an alternative strategy to do this, which is to allow the read models to read across versions. So if you allow version 2 to read directly from version 1, then you don't actually need the tombstone event.
Right.
Because that's basically what the tombstone event is about, is to route or make the data accessible for the version 2 read model. But if it is allowed to kind of be aware of, if it's self version aware, then you can kind of skip this.
That's true. And we already talked about another way of looking at, hey, if this thing is not finished or doesn't exist yet, look at the old version for now. And even then we can do on the fly adjustment to the data if we know the nature of the bug. So there's many ways to deal with this, but again, the focus of this is to remove the need to replay a year's worth of data in events just to adjust a read model, right? I don't want to be doing that in real systems. I think it's a real danger of having, not having the ability to react to a serious bug fast enough. So that's what I would keep focus on that.
Read model here is meaning cache, so to speak, right?
No, a traditional read model, traditional pub sub system in event sourced and CQRS systems.
But I mean, if you're not caching it, so to speak, then you just deploy new code and it's gonna read the part of the event stream it needs.
Yeah,
You
but if
have,
that event stream is the entire history,
that's why
then it's
you're
going to
doing
be
closing the
slow.
books, right?
Exactly. So we're trying to apply closing of the books, but for the read model purpose. Because if you have, you know, something like something that looks at multiple streams, etc., you're going to have to replay quite a lot. But again, it's kind of, how far back do you have to keep data to keep blue-greens alive in a fast way, or like blue-greens possible that are fast in an event source systems. And the core thing is, like, I have a bug in my read model in the way that CQRS and event sourcing has been taught. You need to replay everything, and for some companies that's 10 years of data, and that means 2 days of warming up that new fixed read model. And if that's a serious bug and you need it to be fixed right away, you have to wait 2 days, but maybe now you have to deploy some sort of a weird patch that will adjust the data in that read model, or maybe run some sort of an update statement, and hope that subsequent events don't ruin your adjustment. You got a lot of problems to kind of face if you're looking at a read model that is constantly updated. So there's, do you fix it with a large update statement? How are you sure that you did the correct calculation by, what that would be? Can you reflect in the code that adjusts the values in the actual table to be equivalent as the code that is, deployed in the new version of the read model, and those event handlers to update that read model correctly again? That's the interesting part.
Yeah.
And how do you know you don't over apply a compensating action? Because you might have updated something else flies in, but you already deployed, the version of that event handler that also adds the missing 10%. Now you're over 10%. You have an entry now because of this time in between where you had potentially a risk of doing both. So the idea is to create a set of conventions for how we think about these things for read models, so that we have a guarantee switch over without these potential, either miss rows for adjustments or double apply the adjustments for affected rows by the bug.
I started this fire and I'm running from it. I've been working for 13/studying for 13 hours straight, and
Okay.
the wife is
no problem. I know you
messages.
had the same issue yesterday, so I thank you for joining, and I will be supplying the recording from the workshop. So look out for that, and nice to have you during the meetup for a little bit at least, and then we'll take over from here.
I will watch the recording at some point when I'm recovered.
Yeah, of course. Probably play at
Thank
a
you.
double speed so it gets faster.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a great weekend.
I will slow my parts because you already know that I love the sound of my own voice.
Of course.
Bye.
Good. Have a good weekend.
Bye. Bye. You too.
See you online. Bye. All right. So, so does that make sense, Einar? What we're after here? This blue-green deploy. I think we might have touched on this in our meetups beforehand, but it came up again during the workshop. How do we not get stuck in some of the common criticisms of event sourcing, that it's too much data to worry about, and some of these read model aspects of needing to replay everything weighs down the system too much. What are your thoughts?
I tend to try to delay read models as much as possible. I have had a bug like this bite me in the ass in the system, and what we ended up doing was stop piping into a SQL database and just keep the projection in memory.
Right.
And that actually ended up being faster. Like, we can have an LRU cache for like each of the streams that the projection depends on, and that means the switch is immediate. and if I want to bring up another API or another node in the system, that's no problem at all. It's all in memory, no shared dependency between them. So yeah, I think when you do have these large read models, this is a problem. But I think your example of a discount table might not need a big table behind it. Like if you just had a discount stream on some dimension, you might be able to just keep it in memory all the time, and therefore make these blue-greens super easy and performant.
Yeah, I think you're kind of you're dependent on the type of information in that, right? You can certainly do that in a lot of cases, but there are ones that are, the trickiest ones, the ones that span a lot of time, the ones that involve cross entity calculations, so you can't identify single rows to correct. Like our example that we used was a discount for the store. So you have to look at, total sales of all orders for X amount, whatever your business rule is, things like that, based on profitability maybe, whatever your scheme is. It might be very tough to unlock exactly, individual pieces of data. You understand that this large moving average is being calculated, or not maybe an average, it might actually have some other weird business rules in it that makes it tough to untangle. And so what we're looking for is, an overarching pattern of how to actually start thinking about snapshots from the perspective of a read model, and then in those tricky situations. And then because we have a snapshot, then the blue-green deploy should be fast anyway, because we shouldn't have to replay 10 years of history to populate that. And we are going to have to replay things because it's every event from every order for this particular case. It may be and stopgap measures. Maybe it takes a long time to calculate what that discount amount is, because the amount of orders over the last 3 months is going to take a couple of hours to do that. Do we take the discount off temporarily? Is that something that we have as a feature toggle or a configuration that we flip at the top level to stop the bleeding, fix the problem underneath, so people can still use it? They're kind of meh. We might lose, 10% of our potential sales because the prices are slightly higher, because we're not applying that discount. But then we fix it, and then we have, the appropriate amount of discount, 11% or whatever it is, and then sales go back up again, right? So these are, we need to bubble these up to a business level in terms of guidance as to what we do in an emergency situation like that, but then have the backing technical sort of acumen, but also the accounting acumen to understand where the calculations came from for the source events and things like that. So what we were doing is really trying to see what those events are that we can make use of on a infrastructure level to make sure that we can support the fastest way to fix the bug and accurately track still what has happened, and leave all evidence, again, like event sourcing does, as to how we got into the situation, how we got out of it, and how the system works with the fixed read model. So that's what we're after, and it's the last applicable topic from the workshop we finished. We went over a lot of different concepts to teach people about all this stuff, and this is kind of like the next frontier. I don't see this being discussed quite often in the literature about event sourcing out there. People don't really blog about this aspect of it. They say that it's a good idea to close the books, and generally that concept stops when discussing, after we discuss aggregates and closing the books and aggregates and starting new aggregates based on some state that it got to and starting a new one, so that we don't have to replay too many events or look for events that are too old, whatever the case may be. That we understand that. We just haven't gone and shown the impact that the same things, the same problems arise on the read model. And I think that's the next level of making sure things are properly documented in how you do them, and give people guidance so that when they're looking to do event sourcing, they're not facing challenging questions from the database administrators or CTOs or architects about what's going to happen with correcting mistakes when you have so many events in the system after a year, and that they don't want to hear that it's going to take 10 hours to fix that bug. You want to fix that bug in minutes, and I believe it's actually easier to do in an event source system if you do have this tombstoning applied to read models, because we have better accountability for data, etc. And this is not, those criticisms by the CTOs should really be answered right away, that we're still even in a worse situation without event sourcing with some of the other bugs for different reasons. You just don't know how you got to something, so your bug fixes are going to have some sort of a lossy compensation with no real accountability of how you got there. In this case, we pay with the cost of replay, but at least we're accurate. And I think there's an even better place that we can get to. Oh, thank you, Luca. Luca went. Have some people dropping off, but I actually forgot to tweet this. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, I think my head is
exploding
today, so I'm gonna leave you guys.
Yeah, we'll take care from here. We'll take the torch and continue to fight through this problem, and hopefully we can post something and you can catch up later. Maybe this is a good one to put on the blog because it's not really addressed. So if we can come up with an idea and start to blog about it.
All right. Well, thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
See you online later. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend.
So if we dig a bit more into this, we're looking at our event stream on the one hand, and we're looking at our read models on the other.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about scenarios where we've built up this read model where we know it's been wrong for a long time, such that our snapshots, our closing of the books, is now also wrong for I don't know how many months.
Correct.
And we need some way to fix that.
Yeah, and ideally, I don't want it to be a scavenger hunt or a mystery to solve going all the way back, but we kind of understand that maybe we have a calculation that's always making these figures off by 10%. So really what we need to do is fix just the latest snapshot and adjust it to be increased by 10% or whatever it is, and then just redeploy a read model that doesn't have the bug, and the system should continue to work. That's our ideal scenario for the blue-green deploy. And yeah, if we had 2 years of this continual problem, that's okay. That's stored in events, and the consequences of people looking at that bad data is also stored in the history. Nothing we can do about it. We're just, being mindful and have proper accounting for those occurrences. But what we can do for the business is that, look, we found it and we fixed it right now. And so it didn't take us 5 hours to replay the history of 10 years because there's, terabytes of information perhaps. We were able to deploy and have a new read model within seconds. Well, mechanically seconds, but with all the human interaction. Within minutes, we were able to deploy a proper view a proper read model that's now showing correct data on all the screens. So that's because that's the argument that goes against the event sourcing is your system was alive for too long and you took advantage of this replay all events all the time, and now you have a problem where you have to wait 5 hours for this to propagate and replay everything, and only then can you switch over. So now the business says, well, I don't want that, and what can you do about it? Well, we can close off the checkout counter for 5 hours. And the business is going to be angry because we can't switch off the ability to receive money. This is not good, right? So they're not going to be too pleased with the fact that you did event sourcing when you didn't take into account this delay in being able to replay all events when there's so many of them over that long of a history.
I guess then the question is, what can you disable for those? Let's say it's a 1 hour delay.
Yeah, I mean, you would disable things that introduce further risk to that, or you just simply say that, well, it's been running with that bug for however many months. So what's the big deal with it, running another 5 hours? That's the common sense thing. But if it's an exposure to something that hasn't occurred yet, you might have, but if it does occur, it's a huge impact and it can bankrupt the business or severely, do some damage. Then you perhaps need to shut down the site until the risk has been removed, and that it requires replaying all the events. So I don't want to do that. I want to say fixed, done. And so again, this goes back to where we're talking about these kind of really thinking about how to put this switch over, to this other read model. It's if we self-impose, what we kept going back to, this idea that our hot data should be very small, 300 megabytes as we do these switches. That should give us read models that tend to work within the amount of data you need to have currently online to effectively run your website. But in case there's something that's coming out of history, it goes in and looks at this historic data, which is 10 terabytes or petabytes or whatever, just a large amount of data that's slower. And then we're talking about different ways of bringing that back. And for aggregates, we went through this. It's easy. Oh boy, we have some things missing. Have to refresh this. Miro is running out of memory.
It tends to do that.
Yeah.
But this actually brings up another interesting benefit of event sourcing when you're talking about these discounts, because you probably have sold a lot of items with the wrong discount.
That's right.
And you'll still have that record now forever, whereas in a more traditional system, you might run a migration, lower everything by 10%, and you'll lose what you actually sold it as.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, the whole idea of just having the current snapshot of what things are has significant disadvantages. But so again, this is pretty easy to do per entity. If you're talking about business entities, this is the snapshotting that we can continue carrying forward, so that we can make use of this smaller, faster storage that's local and might be more expensive. And these things that are in the darker yellow sit on this, cheaper storage, but larger, still available. We can migrate those things when they become active again if we need, by doing this kind of scheme. Easy for entities, and so not so easy for read models. And we've had so many discussions on how to break this up, right? And now we're finally looking at, well, let's give it a proper try and give a solid example of one of those cases so that we can give some advice on proactively having these read models implemented in us in such a way that we don't have they don't exist in a very large, they don't blow up this online storage, right? Because or worse yet, because they depend on all of these old events, and you have slow storage here, you're gonna have extra delays replaying all of the events to catch that read model up. So the closing of the books, applying it to read models, is something that hasn't been really discussed and needs to be. I think we need to have the advantage of fast blue-green deploys with EventStore systems. And the last challenge there is the read model question. I've articulated this over and over again, and looked at it multiple times. I think we kind of talked about convention-based things, such as a read model that in its name has the current month, and so you carry over if you get a query for the new month, let's say May just started or June just started, and the read model is empty. The API layer can say just copy as a seed event the snapshot of the read model at the end of May, and that'll be the first thing you subscribe to on this read model, which is anything to do with June events. And the first of those events is the seed, the start of all of the entries that you might have at the end of the previous month. And then you just continue to subscribe like you would, but you're always just going to need, if there's a bug in there that you want to fix and you don't care about old data, then it's easy. You just redeploy the new read model and switch off, delete that read model and replay all the events with the bug fixed, and you're done. It could be that you need to adjust the values in that initial seed event, and that's okay. That could be part of the event handler. It'll probably have a special case for the date that you discovered the bug, so that in July and August you don't apply that anymore to those snapshots, right? So you specifically say that you've applied it only in this particular case when you fix this bug. Not sure about that, if that's good enough, because what if you have a second bug later? Are you going to have this proliferation of special rules for if the date matches or whatever? It seems like you're dragging in a lot of garbage into that event handler as you fix more and more bugs. So there's probably maybe that's good in an emergency situation to just get it going, but then you probably want to have a proactive way to correct and generalize the solution, so you don't have a ton of flaky code sitting in those event handlers as you accumulate more and more bug fixes.
So how would you correct an event? I mean,
compensating actions. I mean, you wouldn't correct the event. I'm strong.
Yes, yeah.
I am very much against correcting events, and except in rare cases, because that is what happened. That is the responsible thing to do, is leave a record in the way that we thought things were happening, and all you can do is have compensating actions to adjust future data, and from that specific point on, do things responsibly, and those events no longer have that deficiency. But yeah, like Greg always says, accountants don't have erasers for a reason. You can't go back to last year's, how you did your taxes, put an eraser to something and change the value. It's on the ledger that sale happened, that that money was transferred for that exact amount. If you made an error, you put in a compensating action of reverse transaction, and redo the transaction with a note that it's adjusting for this transaction that happened 1 month ago. That's how accountants do that, and I think we should follow the same thing for information systems.
But they also close the books, and there's an opportunity to fudge some numbers.
Yeah, I mean, there's always there's always an opportunity to do that, but if you think of with the mindset that you're using a pen, not a pencil, you're less likely to be fudging numbers because you're unlikely to recover that. I mean, currently we're working with a similar approach to how we do billing for our clients, that I can have people adjust their hours if they're making mistakes, etc. But after 30 days have passed, I'm using a different ledger for their hours. Anything that they edit that's older than 30 days ago, they know that it's not going to matter because those events or entries for the time entry are already in a different system that is not going to be updated by entries in what they control if any of those entries are older than 30 days. They can try, but it won't. The other system just simply won't pick up those edits. So, yeah.
So when we generate this initializing event for V2, do we then, and that has the actual error, right? This tombstone event.
Yeah.
Do bad calculation. So do we then issue another event that will compensate for it?
Perhaps. That's one way to do it. Another, like what we said just a second ago, is to have the dumb thing to do is to have an if statement that if it's this particular snapshot, adjust the values by 10%.
In the event handler.
Yeah, literally. And I think it's fine, but maybe you're on to a better way of doing things, is that let's not mix up the event handler to have all these random if statements in it as we fix more and more bugs. Let's put in an adjustment event that will have all of those things, and we have a proper event handler for that type of event that we can continue to let live, along with normal functionality, and it won't get in the way. So yeah, that's probably a better way to do it.
That way we will have a record of.
Exactly, that we adjusted it, and it actually just lives on that timeline, and we can allow the read model to just be simple and continue to live on as it's supposed to. So this is a very good, if this is a bug, if we had a bug, adjust for error, and then we can have regular event stream something like that. That kind of captures it. Probably not the best way to illustrate it, but we kind of get the message across that that's actually pretty good, because this keeps I can make a note here. This keeps the event handlers clean, so you can forget about the bug, and that'll allow you to not have complexity dealt with as a result of this.
So what happens to the events that get published after a tombstone event?
They're subscribed to. So after the tombstone event, they're subscribed to as anything else. So if you have a tombstone event, an adjust for error event, and then let's say maybe if we're doing discounts for sales, so sale completed, which might just give you a running total. And then another sale completed, right? So this just continues on, and the read model continues
yeah, we already
to
switched
get
here.
these, right? And in this case, yeah, this is V2. Yeah.
Is it possible you wouldn't even need a V2 of the read model if you do this? Just do the adjusting for the
Yeah, I
error,
guess
and
you
add
wouldn't
one
need
more
it.
handler to V1
You're right.
does the adjustment, and there's actually no need for a V2 read model.
You're right.
Making
So
this
if
way
we
better.
find a tombstone, this is a good point. If we find a tombstone event, then we just drop the table and recreate the table and populate it with what the tombstone event has, and then read the next event. I think that makes sense. That's great. Yeah. So I like this. This is much simpler.
I mean, it depends on the error. If the error is in the read model, then
Well, we have adjust for error here.
we have compensated for an error in the event.
Yeah.
But if the, so are we now at the second problem?
Well, yeah, I think we are. Hold on, you're right. Okay, so
Okay.
yeah, if we do have a, so where's the error? If the error
Yeah.
is in the event data, we have to make adjustments this way.
So
That's
we
fine.
kind of have, so this read model version 1 accidentally times 2 the discount.
Yeah.
And that's the bug we need to fix.
So there might. This goes back to what I was talking about in 2009. The only way to accurately place this in the event stream at the right point is to have an event that publishes the change to the read model. It's kind of like a meta event. So because you need to insert it at that point, no? Unless you have some convention where adjust for error has an as of date. I don't know if that
Or you
will help.
could adjust for error on a case-by-case basis, right?
Well, how do you know that it's the discount has been times 2? Just based on the likelihood that it looks like it's too big. But maybe there is some valid discount amounts that are still, you can't really tell if it's been times 2 or not. So we need a more disciplined marker for when, this adjust for error is being done. Can we avoid the versioning of the read model? This is an interesting way of looking at things.
So read model is an interpretation of the event stream, period.
That's right.
So we're just changing our interpretation if this is the bug, right?
Yeah, but the tombstone event captures that. That bug.
So if
a
we
new
move
discount,
the tombstoning forward, maybe we can
as of
tombstone
next
early.
month.
Yeah, maybe.
So does that mean we have to have a temporary read model for the remainder of the current month?
Maybe.
And then we have, I don't know how we can, I'm trying to figure out, because I like your idea of not having to version the read model, because it's not what's storing the facts. So I agree with you on that. Is there a way to reliably do this now so that it makes sense in a simple way?
So it's got to be some specific events, right, that are being...
Well, I know that we have to have this tombstone and this adjust for error, and of course, that's not going to be as clean as that, because we're going to have some events come in after this tombstone event. We're going to only be able to adjust for the error at some point here. And there's an interesting problem here as well. Maybe these sales are coming in so fast that you don't even know where this will end up. So that's why I think there's an as of date, so you can future put it in a future effective date, because you
Yeah.
can't guarantee when this will actually get dropped in. So as of date and time 1 hour from now, that'll give a chance for everything to be eventually consistent. You'll start to apply the adjustment.
Oh, so this adjust for error event here is about starting the process that will create the adjustment events.
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just trying to mark a place in time and say how we can devise a system that we, again, I like the fact that I don't want to have, I just want to fix the bug in the read model if possible, and have adjustments just done in the event stream along with this tombstoning. And the caveat that the tombstoning is introducing is that it's capturing the bad data calculations from the fact that this bug existed in the read model in here.
So do we need something concrete about there having been an event produced that was wrong?
No, we're not. We're trying to just isolate the scenario where the bug is in the read model itself. So the events themselves, these sales completed, let's just say it's just sales completed, right? These sales completed events are happening, and they don't have the error. What we have is an error in the calculation on the read model.
Ah, right.
Okay, and so this is not the problem. But however, the tombstone event is a problem because that's sort of how you move data in to here.
Because it's created out of the read model.
That's right, exactly, and that is the problem that we're trying to get around, and to make it complete. Well, let's add the gear.
So ideally, we would have tombstone event created, and then not receive any sales completed event until we actually fire adjust for.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of mechanics we can put, but I want to avoid the mechanics because it seems like there's going to be more code that has to run and cause more issues. The more code you have to run, the more complex the workaround is. So I'm trying to see.
What if you make make a bug in your code that's supposed to do the fix?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Your fix actually introduces yet another bug and another thing you have to manage. So I want to see if we can just, by convention and good practice in the way we treat data, allow for fewer moving parts to get this fixed. So we have a processor that obviously is going to run at the end of the month, and it's going to, inject the tombstone. This is still listening to the old events. And I think we were onto something when there was a convention of end of month where we could rely on that. I want to explore that more, but if we just have the mechanics explicitly done this way, then we show that this is capturing the wrong data. So we need to adjust our sales, and I mean, I don't know what it would be. I mean, maybe the adjust for sales maybe that we just add whatever sale was completed, we do a return of 10% of it so that this thing has the right amount shown. That also seems messy because that's...
Or we could just invalidate the whole sale, right? Sale invalidated and then append another sale completed.
Seems to be a bit of a trade-off. And my brain is really fried after 2 days of workshops. So I'm very tired. I'm very tired, and and I don't think I'm very creative right now to find the solutions. So I'm really looking.
What if you just adjusted the tombstone event itself?
Or create tombstone command publishes 2 events.
What if we just create another tombstone event? I mean, who says these have to only be at the end of I think that there's an interesting thing because you have the thing that's really tough to get around is that these sales completed items are peppering you, like they're happening at the same time as you're trying to do all this orchestration. So you almost need to forward store some sort of a decision that the tombstone, maybe the tombstone events have an as of dates in them. So they always imply, like this is how you do tax, right, in an EventStore system. If there's a tax rate that's going to happen, you're not waiting there until midnight, December 31st, to flip the tax rate to what it's effective as. You add the event, sometime in September when the announcement is, and in that event you have a as of date, January 1st, midnight or something. That's how you implement changes for changing a tax rate by this, effective date. So
Right.
maybe that's what we do here, is that if we have tombstoning encapsulate an as of date, it allows the mechanisms of our pub sub and subscriptions to take advantage of that when we're trying to fix something. So and how do we do that without wrecking the read model? Perhaps we have a pre-calculator that's just going to be used in the interim for that transfer, those events that are still going to be coming in based off of this old tombstoning thing. I still think that we're falling back on, well, I mean, we're going to have two versions of the read model. Yeah. Aren't we?
You need to have a fixed one.
We do have yeah, exactly. We have to have a fixed one, and there's going to be a carryover, especially when we get into, multiple nodes and things like that. So yes, there's going to be a time when you have, well, maybe just one. Let's just say it's one. Even with the idea that there's one, you're going to have this even small time window when you're replaying all these to have the fixed one deployed, and then when you're happy that you're actually caught up, then you point your system to look at that fixed version, and everything should follow through.
Yeah, and then the big problem is like the read model doesn't have enough information to know what the actual issue was, because we have a read model that's just Joe has this much discount and Mary has this much discount, and it's based on their sales in the past, how much discount they're going to get.
Right. So there's almost
because
like
we
this.
threw all of that context away.
Yeah.
We are going to need to rehydrate this somehow.
Well, we are rehydrating, but the nice thing is that we know what the errors are in this thing, and so perhaps the fix has, if we make a version that's fixed, then we have some sort of a preprocessor that adjusts for the error. Yeah, because you're still going to be getting an error from the instance that's got the bug, obviously, in it. You're going to have a new one that's going to have perhaps an adjusted, this adjustment in it, and be able to deal with it properly. And then, so how do you ignore the adjustment in the old one? Or do you need to? It's already giving you the wrong information, so...
Yeah, so like it's not based on wrong information in this case. It's interpreted the information
Sorry,
correct.
Right. That's correct. Yeah, it's interpreting the information wrong. Right, correct. And so adjust for... Do we need this then?
So we know the tombstone is going to still be correct.
No, it's not going to be correct because
No, you based the tombstone on the read model.
the old crappy version which has the error. So this has errors in it.
Right. Okay. So you're tombstoning the read model. You're not tombstoning the aggregate.
That's right. No, we can't. Remember, this is something that takes in all sales from all aggregates.
Mm-hmm. That is true. So you're there. You just have it.
And let's just say, for intents and purposes, we can't use any
Mm-hmm.
tombstones of the aggregates to do that.
Right.
So this is the fly in the ointment that we have to deal with here.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So in that
But
case,
I think we're close. I think we
Yeah.
just have to say when we deploy this new version, it starts to listen to this. It's got bad data from this one coming to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to put new in here so we know. So it also reads this.
But then your adjust for error has a reference to the
Right.
to
Yeah, and is this a generic type of event that we want to continue to listen for? Maybe there's another error and we also have this. Is this maybe a set of update statements that are just interpreted? Or is it business language? What is in this event, right? I certainly don't not liking the idea of having something like update statements sitting in there.
But you're rehydrating from a tombstone. So if you know what the
Well,
errors
yes and
are,
no, but we have a tombstone and these
Mhm.
as well.
Exactly. So if we had a processor come in and read this tombstone, adjust it for errors, and then just emit another tombstone, isn't that going to rehydrate
Oh,
the read
that's
model
correct. Yes,
with
that's a good way.
correct data?
Or
So
yeah, I
if
think we're starting to do that. So we force another tombstone.
Exactly. So it doesn't matter how many cell completed events there are. We just have some processor
Yes,
that's gonna create a new tombstone
that's right.
with the fixes,
Mm-hmm.
and that then is going to pipe into our discount read model, which is going to be new.
So, but okay, so we have to, without reading all the history of the events, we're going to, before that tombstone, we have to do this adjustment.
Exactly. Let's move that here. Yeah.
Something like that. Okay, now we're onto something. I think this is good.
Yeah, if we move these here, the adjust for error is going to be listened by this processor as well. And the end result is going to be a new tombstone that rehydrates the read model.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to make a note here. Force new tombstone. For the purpose of correcting RM bug.
And that's kind of like if you're an accountant and you've tallied up your ledger for 3 years and you're starting a new ledger and you just look at what's in your account rather than tallying up the ledgers from the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yep. I'm just gonna reattach this from the bottom because we're running out of room here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well I'm liking this. This is more, there's less complication.
We don't need to introduce a new concept.
No,
either,
exactly.
Which is
another
benefit.
Yeah. I'm still, the last question mark is like exactly what does that thing contain? I really don't want it to contain SQL statements for adjusting rows. Ugh.
Does it contain the sort of same format that you would have in your Tombstone event? How do you make Tombstone events yourself?
Maybe, yeah, maybe there's some of that logic.
But then you would also need to deploy a new processor. Or does he already know about this event?
Well, if the mechanics, what Einar is saying, if the mechanics are the same as creating a tombstone, then maybe it's just taking advantage of the same mechanics, and therefore you don't. So you don't need a new processor. That would
I
be
mean,
ideal.
for the adjust for error as of date.
Yeah, no, exactly. So this is the name is maybe there is a, yeah, I don't know what to call it. Almost there. We almost figured it out. We're so close.
If we just have something like,
I mean, it would need to have the same thing as the Tombstone event store.
Yeah, it might have I mean, I really don't want to inject code in there, right? It's just got to be values.
Not yet.
Well, I know that's a different topic that we talked about, but that's on another level. It'll be interesting when we have to correct things like this in that type of system. I think it's complicated in our minds because it's a new perspective. It's not. I believe that it actually is a simpler way of working once we get used to thinking this way and we have some insights of the nature and the flow of data. Then I think what it'll precipitate out of this work is something that's actually a simpler, more universal way to adjust for bugs, have these quick, blue-green deploys, and then even shove all of this into an event store in a functional manner. So this is a really, really good research here, and but yeah, definitely could look at accounting patterns in accounting systems for how to solve this.
moving these arrows a bit.
Yeah, we don't need the V1 now. That's really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same model that we end up with here at the end. And that will have Joe like this.
Yeah.
When is this adjust for error produced? Who produces this event? This processor reads it. But
Yeah,
shouldn't
I
this
think
be produced by the create tombstone command, first one as well.
the adjust for error I'm thinking maybe it's an admin screen in the system. I don't know how generic this can be made, at least for a good subset of problems in this space where you have these discounts, etc., where you just need to say, I noticed the amounts. Thing that's scaring me is if you want to systematically look at every single row in some way.
You're thinking just user action.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, very often it's not economical to solve these problems in another way.
So, this is I think this is a good place to do it. But the mechanics, I like the fact that we reduced them to just forcing another tombstone, and having a type that we listen to for adjustments, which should match at least row IDs or something for
Exactly.
for doing that, and say that the only issue here is, do we have time to catch the error that can be introduced in these further sales?
There wouldn't be an error in these further sales, right?
In
'Cause
these two, it
we're
would be,
listening
because we
directly to
haven't
the
adjusted
event
it yet, right?
Yeah, but we're listening to the events now. We're
Oh,
not
yes, you're
listening
right.
to the read model, and the events are
Yes.
correct.
The
So there's some
events
logic
are
there.
correct. That's right. So it's always about what the read model has as an error.
Yeah.
Okay, so the takeaway is after
Because we're only
adjustment action,
correcting
create a
the
tombstone.
tombstones. We're only
Yeah.
correcting the tombstones. That's the only thing that locked in an error. The events don't have the error because the only error is in the read model. So
Yes.
we only need to have this. I just want to be a little bit more, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a... Wow, this is so small.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I think you and enlarging the text on it.
Did I delete something I shouldn't? No.
But yeah, I think one added benefit of this is once you're done making this adjustment and you know your read model is correct again, you can throw away all of the code that made this.
That's true. Yeah, you could basically say, I mean, the adjust for error event could have a reason that you type in. Calculation was bad because we multiplied an extra 10%. Whatever it is, we can add that, right?
Exactly.
So we can say has to only adjust this events themselves are correct. I'm just gonna create a little bit. Is that actually readable? Okay, it is.
I'd make it a bit bigger.
There we go. Yeah, I don't know why these diagrams are so large. I think we were just zoomed out when we were starting to draw, and okay, that starts to make sense. Okay, so we could build a system that solves a lot of the problem cases with read model errors by following this pattern. I think this pattern can improve. I think there's still some opportunity to add some more simplicity here, especially when we talk about conventions like end of months and things like that. There might be even fewer things you need to do. So Daniel, is this kind of what you're expecting? Because this is where we kind of left off in this idea of tombstoning, and you know, this doesn't seem to be too complex. If there are no errors, you know that the tombstoning can be done automatically, and it should work quite well with, you know, spinning up another instance of the read model. It'll read the same events. It'll be, you know, it'll spin up very quickly, so you can do not just blue-green deploy, but also, you know, make new node instances for accepting a lot of reads.
Yeah, I think this brought it even further than what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I was trying to wrap my head around tombstoning on aggregates and stuff, and then just...
Well, by comparison, this is way harder, isn't it?
Yeah, way harder.
Because think of these sales completed as being parts of individual aggregates themselves. But, I mean, if you look at the tombstoning of aggregates, you know, it really is this pattern. Right? And so when you're doing hydrate, it only bubbles back down to this one. And it actually has its own ID. So you only have a reference to the old IDs in here, so that you can link them together if you ever need to go and investigate the old events. But if there's no errors, no problems, or whatever, you should really just be going back to this quote-unquote snapshot or initial event in tombstoning. Snapshot versus tombstone are different. like I said, you know, for snapshotting, we have something that looks like this. But I'm really happy that we got to that level of understanding for snapshotting read models. I think it's a big step forward to giving people a lot more courage to do event source systems that are incredibly much more performant than traditional systems from all respects, including blue-green deploys. Actually, I don't want that to be. That's the last snapshot, and so the relevant replay on a snapshot is these yellow ones, but it's containing the same ID. And so you can see that in a traditional snapshotting, you know, what people talk about entities and aggregates, having snapshots for the purposes of, maybe I should just mark them as way more noticeable. Notice that we just need to replay from here on while using the same ID, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. You just go backwards and ask each event are your snapshot. Right?
That's right. And so same idea here, but it's a different swim lane because we have a different ID. It's almost as if it's entirely a different aggregate.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to migrate that, which is good in a sense that, you know, these IDs, you can have an index of IDs that are relevant versus an index of IDs that are irrelevant. And so this is tombstoning versus snapshots. Geez, that's really small. So that's tombstone. And this is snapshots. And yeah, I'm really happy about what we did. Why is this yellow again? That's odd. My OBS seems to reverse my colors for some reason. I don't know why. Properties. There we go. It seems to have an XOR operation. I had to flip that on, and now I had to flip it off for it to work again. Weird. Okay. So, I think we got to a really good spot because, I mean, this is the easy one, right? I think, Daniel, you will see that the snapshotting of regular events, pretty easy. Tombstoning, pretty easy. You're dealing with one stream, and every time you want to do something, you have to go and hydrate, so it's easy to do that. But when you have these multiple subscriptions, gosh, where do we draw it? Right here. This is really good. Yeah. Thanks for letting me borrow your brain, because mine was pretty much finished. Can we make this bigger?
I think you can. You can make it up to like 300 pixels or something.
I don't think you can for when you're labeling the arrows, unfortunately.
Oh,
Well, it doesn't matter.
that's regrettable.
Well, I would just want to make sure that it's a little bit more compact. So I'm just going to bring everything down a bit so we can not have to scroll up and down too much.
Yeah.
You know, these actually should be in the same row, honestly. And yeah, that looks pretty ugly. Let's move that around. That'd be good. And the arrowheads are so tiny because we zoomed in so much. Jeez.
Should we make it smaller?
Nah, you know, let's just leave it for now. We've had so much work to do. This is, you know, someone else can clean it up. Or I mean, if you want, you can.
I just mean the entire board. I think you can just do Command A and.
Oh no. I'm sure there's little drawings there that are already small, and we'll destroy those in the process.
Oh, it keeps the aspect ratio. I've had to do it on some boards.
This is, you know, I just want to kind of remove some of this other old stuff. We don't actually need it. I think we got really good insight here as to how to do this. So I can shrink. I like this error. Discount read model to use. I don't think we need that. So we did call it V1 and V2, right? Of the read model?
Yeah, I mean, it is the same read model. It's just...
with the bug fix. So maybe we can just put a star, like an asterisk, fixed bug. Bug exists.
Yeah.
Something
We can
like
mark
that.
those as events on the timeline, I'm sure.
Yeah, read model has a bug. Tombstone event is compensated. Oh, yeah, this is wonderful. Yeah, this is going to help a lot of people. I don't see anyone talking about doing these tombstones for read models.
I hadn't even thought about doing it ever for read models.
Well, the reason
But it actually makes sense.
I've seen the problem where, you know, these read models are done in ways that in one company were 2 days long to replay all the events because there was so much history, and that was the only way to get a new version of the read model deployed. That's not, to me, that's not acceptable. I want EventStore systems to be superior to traditional systems. All that accountability to be, you know, torpedoed and sabotaged by a really nasty blue-green deploy story. That's not good.
What's the size of your Tombstone event at this point? Is it going to be like, or are we
Yeah,
talking
that's
megabytes in a single event?
That's another thing to consider. Do we need to leverage a pointer because you have so many row entries that that is going to be nasty? So yeah, this is the beginning of the story. You certainly have to have other data management questions answered, such as if this is a row, if this is a table with 1 million entries in it, you know, creating an event with 1 million entries in it is not going to be performant. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about EventStore not being locking, but then it writes one event at a time. So if you're writing a million events in one, that's gonna be a lot.
So I mean, definitely, you probably want to have some other way to, you know, perhaps, it might actually be. I'm not sure if it's in a regular RDBMS, if this is going to be a problem, where it would be less of a problem in some other scheme where you can use references, because if if it's the same value, you can just have pointers to the values or entire trees of values even to, you know, make this a lot more efficient. And I'm thinking of Git and how has hashes for trees of
Like a
areas.
content addressable cache for
Exactly.
your read
So
model.
so this is interesting because we start to push on the fact that our RDBMS is probably the best for performant event source systems. Maybe
They're
this
not.
is where we have to exactly. So this might be a case in point where you can show that the virtue by virtue of the type of data stored in these systems where these are issues, such as something that has existed for 10 years and has a lot of data, you're going to need to have a better way to manage that data, and shoving a read model tombstone event is not going to be a traditional event. It's going to be pointing to the tip of another tree structure with a hash, the Merkle tree type thing, directed acyclic graph of all the information, so that you're only shipping the changes that you need to the new version, or not
But
even
what
shipping
does
anything.
Adam? I'm sorry, I missed the entire conversation
Ah,
before that. Like, what is a tombstone event in terms of like what kind of information has inside?
well,
Is it like a snapshot?
well, what we have here is an answer to doing a fast blue-green deploy of a fix to a read model. That if you didn't have it and you just say replay all events from the beginning of time, that means 10 years of information. It's going to take 2 days for you to have a read model with the bug fixed, and that's not acceptable.
What about with the snapshots? Let's say you put a bunch of snapshots, so it's not 10 years. It will be like
Well,
3
that's
of
the
them,
thing.
hopefully.
If this read model has accumulation of all those events and has totals and calculations that you can't split out, individual streams that it came from to have some optimizations with their snapshots, you need to have a snapshot of the actual read model. So
I
that
get it.
every time you do a replay all,
I get it. Yeah.
all you have to go back to is just the last tombstone and the subsequent events.
So
And
this will be, if I'm not mistaken, when you have to deal with more than one stream, is where the snapshots alone will not help you. So
That's
where
right.
the tombstone got it. Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's right. Because yes, if you have a simple read model that doesn't do calculations across aggregate boundaries, and you have an entry per aggregate, like a row per aggregate, for example, you could have a very systematic way to to do that, and we could probably get into that in the next meetup, is to look at the simpler case where your read model is a simple lookup for some calculated value per aggregate or per stream of entities for each entity. So each entry in the read model maps to an aggregate. You can take advantage of a lot of scaling type of constructs and even leverage the fact that these aggregates themselves have snapshots to not have to go through and look at a ton of history. And you can also do it on demand, right? If someone is reading that row, you can say, oh, I don't have a new version of this row yet. Go calculate it on an as-needed basis. And then, meanwhile, have a background process continue to update, the rest of the rows.
So the idea will be kind of like introduce a new read model stream, like the exact same tech that react to multiple other streams and create events as state type of situation.
Well, this is the trick here, is this processor. Notice that it's actually taking the read model as the input to create the tombstone.
Right.
Which means if the read model had an error, this tombstone contains the error. And even though individual events don't have errors, sales completed don't have errors, the tombstone contains the error.
Yep.
And therefore you have to adjust for it and then continue. But that's the brilliance that Einar brought, because we were thinking, well, I was thinking of some more complex things to do, but we kind of said, Einar said that why not just reuse the tombstone event to do this and coordinate this, but make sure we have the as of date here, because these things will keep coming in at the same time, so you can do kind of the same effect as same type of thing as an effective date for a tax that's going to be implemented on January 1st of 2022. You don't keep yourself awake until midnight and switch the tax rate as close as possible to midnight. You put in an event sometime in September saying effective date blah blah blah, and your code looks for whether the command you're issuing, what timestamp it has, and apply it, right?
Right.
So same idea here. Can we make use of those same disciplines to
basically adjust this? And, that's interesting. I like that idea.
Yeah. So this is, but again, the goal is to have as fast, if not faster, blue-green deploys and bug fixes in event-sourced systems, even though the bugs may exist in complex pieces such as read models that aggregate across all events, and you cannot take advantage of the benefits you have in snapshots within aggregates, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I like it. I need to try it out and see how it goes.
Yeah, well, it's now simpler. So I think the previous ideas of how to do this, and I think we, in our meetups, we had, there's a few, attempts to talk about how to do this, but they seem to not get the simplicity that we kind of showed here, and started to ignore focusing on the aggregates that comes from multiple aggregates, started to treat them as a single stream because we just don't care. And this is back to my point about what makes a stream a stream. It's whatever you want it to be. How we started to look at subsets of events so that we don't look at the complete aggregate to do some things.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same line of thinking just allowed us to streamline, no matter which order the sale completed belonged to. We just in the case of this discount read model, we don't care, and therefore we put them all in one line, and we linearized this process and started to talk about what in this case, when there's a bug in this read model, do we have a fast repeatable pattern to continue to bring this to other events or systems or other parts of our system to fix things. But yeah.
Sounds like we're kind of getting to a recipe book for these scenarios. And if you have
Absolutely.
a scenario where your event is incorrect and your read model has a bug, then you'll apply first the recipe to fix the events and then the recipe
That's
to
right.
fix the read models.
Exactly. And I think that's going to be, you look at 13 years of people doing event source systems, and only now we're starting to get these recipe books. That's, yeah. It's
That's
actually a
also
good
how
thing
long
because
it takes for some errors to appear in systems. Like I'm sure we didn't.
I've seen them
like
already.
30 years ago keep track of SQL migrations.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
But I think it's a positive thing in one way, is because I think the types of errors and how fast we can fix them have been that scenario has been greatly improved with event sourcing. And I continue to say that we don't really have bugs in any of our systems that we create because we're doing event sourcing all the time that take longer than 4 hours to fix. So that is a leaps and bounds better than traditional systems. You're already in a better league. But at the same time, because there's more and more of these systems that are event sourced now, some of these other issues, such as being bogged down with a 2-day replay cycle just so you can get a read model up to date after doing a bug fix in it, that's not acceptable, right? We're pushing the boundary, and so we need to look at tombstoning and having that low amount of operational data to rely on to keep our system running, and close the books, so that we don't have to replay all 10 years of data to keep our system running. We just need the last month. That'll do. Last 30 days, last 2 months, whatever it is, that's what's going to keep our system fast and nimble and correct things. But these tombstones exist for a lot of purposes inside the read models, where you have to treat that read model and what it looks like, what it looks at in terms of the events it cares and how it interprets them, as being arbitrarily complex sometimes, where we can't rely on the other organization of at least our entities or things we use to decide whether the event is okay to add.
Right. I'm actually really mad at myself right now because I've never thought of actually tombstoning read models, and the amount of effort I've put into things like just switching an ORM and batching events in order to get the read model performance faster when I have to rebuild it when inevitably errors occur.
Yeah, right. It's crazy.
And all I had to do was snapshot the damn table, put it on S3, and I can rehydrate it anywhere.
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah, yeah. And I'm just looking for, I think at this point, technologies to use referential integrity so that we're not making giant copies. Like this Tombstone event is very much an abstraction, an interface, a theoretical concept rather than a discipline of making a really nasty, ugly giant event. Now, maybe for certain ones it's okay. Like maybe if you have a, let's say, a total sales figure for every single sale. Well, that's just one row. Okay, fine. Like, might as well dump it into an event. Okay. But when you're talking about a million rows, yeah. But generally in those cases, when you have a million rows, I'm trying to think of a scenario. When you have that, it's usually reflecting just a projection of some calculations on an aggregate. So maybe there's still some middle ground there where you can take advantage of a different type of or take advantage of the snapshots of the aggregates themselves to fast track that. But most of the implementations out there, or actually all of them, I haven't heard of this not being done, is that you ignore the snapshots when you're doing the read models, and you replay all events for read models, regardless of if those aggregates do have snapshots themselves or not.
I mean, by definition, the Tombstone event needs to be huge. Because if it isn't, then you would just recreate read model. I mean, if it's something small, then.
Yeah, but if there's a bunch of build-up calculations, right? You still have these sales completed being something that's added and calculated. Moving average is a good example.
Okay.
Unless I don't understand
Maybe it's a
your
complicated.
point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a complicated calculation to calculate.
Maybe, yeah. Like moving averages might not be that trivial. You might have to look at weighing, especially weighted moving average for trading systems, where you have more weight to recent data points rather than the more distant ones. You start to get into some crazy calculations that you have one number, but it's got some crazy way to treat the previous events.
Right.
Well, this was a very productive meetup, and at the end of a 2-day pretty intense workshop. But holy smokes! Let's continue down this road next week, because we're gonna have we might have a slightly later time. I'm gonna maybe try to do the meetup earlier, because we will have the North American workshop with Vaughn next week. So, oh boy, yeah. Then I'm gonna have to reschedule to a different time, but I don't want to miss it, because I think just having so many people learning about event sourcing and event modeling and everything together has really pushed our boundaries of what to experiment with and what's needed to be built and all those things, and we're seeing the benefits of it here. So it's really cool.
Wholeheartedly agree. I think the community in this meetup is some of the best I've seen. It's really friendly, and I don't think anybody's afraid to reveal their lack of knowledge or wanting to learn stuff. At least I'm not. So
Yeah, no, I don't think I am either. I like to. I don't. No one likes a smart ass. I think that's one of the important things that I learned from a comedian, Norm Macdonald. And he's a very smart guy, but he always plays the dummy because he says on stage or people they no one wants to be made to look foolish. So, and I always want to look at these problems through the simplest lens, so that I can communicate it to more people. There's no point in me trying to dump pack sauce on top of this and say, "Oh, this is how it'll work with concurrency at high speed and blah blah blah." I'm gonna lose the audience. People are not. This guy's just talking about esoteric terms, and you're not gonna get a good engagement. So,
Yep.
and be
ask me how I know.
Yeah, and be.
I'm probably one of the youngest one. Like, and until I actually start hanging out with you, I was like, "Yo, these people are too smart." Like, you should get it. Like, at some point, you have to become senior and use a little bit more, I guess, senior word. I don't know if I agree with that anymore, but yeah. But I really appreciate that you make it a little bit simpler to digest.
Yeah,
simpler.
And we got to be critical. We have to be critical of our own ways of doing things, and I think, calling out the deficiencies of event sourcing, where majority of practitioners ignore the tombstoning, ignore the closing of the books, and things like that. It's okay to ignore them for the first part, but you have to plan for putting them in place eventually, and I think exploring these things during meetups and workshops that people attend, and sharing this knowledge pushes things forward more and more. This was really good. So I hope that we continue to expand on this and start to look at a couple of different types of classes of this problem, because there's many different types of read models. Like I said, ones that coincide row for row with all the different aggregates or entities. Other read models, or maybe just a simple calculation, like you said. Other read models may have other complexities, but in essence, we want to be better than traditional systems, and that means that blue-green deploy is not only faster, but it also captures accurately all the nuances of what happened to the data during that transition, and everything still adds up mathematically perfectly. And I think that's what we can offer the industry, to have these systems that are like clockwork, and dependable and predictable, designable, and all the other benefits of having estimates that you can rely on, all these things. So a lot of work. And unfortunately, it's a lot of uncharted territory. There's a lot of tools that exist for traditional databases that make dealing with their deficiencies easier, but they end up being band-aids. They really don't, they make it easy to keep working with a bad system. That's not good. Right? And so what happens when we make patterns and tools to make it easier to work with a good system? It's inevitable that this will win out in the end. You just have to wait to catch up with all the tooling to be brought up, and so we're getting there. Sadly, it's a lot of us doing the work for companies that don't bother because they're just sales, right?
Yeah, that is where I wish sometimes there are like a little bit more alignment across the community, because I know, and I say it multiple times, like, now I don't want frameworks because I want full control, but at the same time I'm getting to the point where I know what belongs to the infrastructure, and I know what I wish I just don't have to deal with until I do, but at least delay that, that ownership of like, here I am just because I want to be like, oh, no framework type of mindset, which I get it. Like, I honestly get it, but there is a cost to get introduced to the ecosystem, and a lot of people doing the exact same work. Like, it's the same in Elixir, for example. Elixir community, we have too many smart people doing the exact same type of work, and nobody knows about them. And like, overall is painful for the
Yeah.
community.
See, I'm glad that you're doing this, Yurtis, because you're a lot younger than me when I started. You know, when I met Greg, I was already in my 30s, and so I had a late start to it. I see you doing the same kind of effort, you know, contributing and asking the right questions and trying things out yourself. So you got a few years ahead on me. So it makes me feel good that, you know, we're connecting, and long after I'm gone or retired or whatever, there'll be someone to take my place with a lot more years ahead of them.
Yeah, hopefully for
Oh
sure.
yeah, no, I'm sure you will. It's great to see, and and you enjoy it, right? So you're here because you have the passion for it, and
Oh,
if people,
absolutely.
yeah, people get it, and one of my reasons for starting this meetup, which I think was started in 2014, it actually was an Ansible meetup, believe it or not. Initially, I was doing a lot more DevOps things at the last job that I had, the absolute last job that I had, and
Which,
then that was at Active State.
yep. Which, by the way, Adam, related to actual event modeling, you know, I got kudos thanks to you from a UX person.
Oh, nice.
Because I sat with her and like we just do the event modeling to figure out where the pain points are and like how to answer the questions she had, because we had no information about, you know, the data engineering or whatever. So yeah, we are getting to the point where like UX people, like people that don't actually code, you know, really appreciate like introducing this type of flows.
Yeah.
Because allowed them to like discover things that they couldn't discover before, and like the collaboration part of it, and like right there, like I taught her like, look, you see you're getting stuck here. This is exactly where you go to the business and ask them. You're right. Like, don't try to be clever. Just bring them on. So
yeah, I think it's opening the kimono of how all this stuff works on the back end. It's not black magic. This is, you know, this is all we're doing here is storing information, and you should know exactly what we store and how we, you know, how we refine the information and show it on the screen. It's not magic. This is where it is. Go find where the info is and help others with it too. So it's pretty cool. But that's awesome that, you know, a lot of people are getting the benefits of it.
I had the same thing recently with a new member of the team that just couldn't get head around core CQRS and event sourcing, and then I drew a first piece in ONote just so they could see how it works, like for a feature we're about to build, and it was like, wow, it's that easy.
Yeah. Easy, it's easy, but people drag in all sorts of things with them, right? So that's the tough part of all this, is that we have old habits and old tools that don't exactly fit this easy pattern, and so yeah, we suffer sometimes.
Okay, guys, I'm going to leave you.
Yeah, we're going to end it now because I've been up since 4 in the morning. But Daniel, such a pleasure. Hope to see you at the next meetup and on the Slack channel and everywhere else on Twitter. And thank you again for joining. And we'll send the recording of the workshop. Have a good one. I'm going to shut it down too. I'm going to go as well. So have a good day. Have a good night. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.